University and as well as the Eurasian campus for giving this opportunity. And even the topic is kind of a major field, and it is not an easy task for me to like wind up everything within the 1 hour time limit, but I'll try my best to cover each and every aspect of in this category and in this field as well. So talking about the today's topic that we are going to share with you is a vital topic. Whatever the field you are expertise at, or whatever the field you are involved in, you have to know your rights. You have to know what are the capabilities of being a human being. What are the rights that you enjoy from your birth to your death. So talking about the public international law, now it has been recognized as one of the most developing fields in the legal industry as well, in the legal aspect as well. Attached with that, whatever the field you represent, the human rights involved in each and every aspect. If you can become an employee, or you can become an employer, master or servant, whatever the category you are, there are some rights that you enjoy. So talking about this aspect, or talking about this field, as we know, in legal history and the legal branches, there are several branches available under law. So if you take mainly in each and every country, we have the domestic legal system, the internal legal system of the country. Apart from that, when we share our industries, we share our knowledge, and we try work with the other countries, sometimes the international law aspects or the international law involves in different ways. So if we talk about the public international law, it is one of the developing branches. Why I would say, as you know, now in this present day world, we have been interconnected with each other in various aspects. As you know, the social media platforms and other communication methods have been evolved from our primary stages, the preliminary communication. We use different types of communications, and we use modern communication in present world day. So in present world, the public international law or the international law aspects largely involved in our day-to-day aspect. With that, the basic human rights has also been recognized more than the earlier days. Now, human rights is not something that comes from nowhere. It has a history. It has been evolved in certain stages of the world history and the world aspects. From the past, let's say, if we go back to those where the periods where the kings ruled our countries, and then the invaders came in different forms, and different scenarios happen in the history. So with that, today, we have the United Nations as the main pillar which safeguards the rights of each and every individual in the world, where they introduce different concepts, different summits and conventions to protect our rights. So basically, this field is developing, and it keeps developing with the technological development in the world, where we are going for a globalization and the electronic era, the digitalization period, and everything happens in a very quick succession. So with that, so you have to know your rights and where you are kept on this society. You have to have an idea whatever the field you involve in. So let me start my session with the preamble clause of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948. So before I go there, if I sum up, as you know, as an entire world, we have faced 2 world wars. From that, the Second World War is disastrous. Like millions of innocent lives had been wasted during these wars. The property has been collapsed. The countries have been collapsed. Then the economic systems, in a very quick session, they fallen apart. So with that, only in 1945, the United Nations was formed, and in 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights were introduced. So if I go there. Now, before the introduction of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there were human rights and there were rights had been recognized in different categories and in different scenarios. So if you look at the preamble clause, where the main definition or the main introduction part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is so vital to understand. It clearly says recognition of the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. So some parts we know in our life, to gain some certain rights, we have to fight for it. Let's say if you work in a business environment, if as an employee, when you face situation, the difficult situations, something about with regard to your salary or with regard to your basic working conditions, basic working environment, the working surrounding, to enhance those, you have to fight for it. But human rights are something vital. When you're born as a human being to the world, your rights have been recognized at that time. So it's very important thing for all of us that we enjoy these rights from our birth. So that is something very vital in the sense, and something very important to understand. So it's an inherent dignity. So each and every one of us has a dignity of our own. We are all humans. We cannot be distinguished from our race, culture, religion, beliefs, nothing. Whatever we believe, whatever the religion we follow, whatever the faith we have, those are irrelevant when you need to get your dignity. Because being a simple human being is more than enough for you to have your dignity as a human being. So that's why each and every one of us are equal. Now, when I say theoretically these words are being given and publicized and reported, now all of us have the same question. Do we really enjoy them? That is the question that every one of us face. So that is the fight we have to be involved in, whether to gain our rights, win our rights back. So in this practical world, or in this particular world, as we know, human rights are universal. They are universal, whatever the continent. Now, for example, I am an Asian. Now most of you might be from the African continent. So whatever the continent you live in, whatever the country you live in, it doesn't matter, because these are universal rights. Everyone should have the access for those rights. Everyone should enjoy those rights. That is what is important, and they are interrelated. You can't say, okay, you can enjoy this right, but you can't enjoy this right. You can't say that. All the human rights which have been recognized under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they are interconnected and interrelated, and also they are interdependent. Now, for example, you have a right to live. So what does that mean? It's not just you can live. You have the right to live with your freedom. You have the right to follow any religion or the faith you believe in. You have the right to work. You have the right for the education and schooling. You have the right to acquire a property. So everything they are interdependent. Not just one. You can't say one right is superior over another thing. The people can't say, okay, you can have this right, but you can't have this right. Everything is interdependent, and they are mutually reinforcing. So these are very vital when you understand the concept of human rights. So international human rights law, therefore, refers to the body of international law designed to promote and protect human rights at the international, regional, and domestic level. So let's see. Now, even we agree on the UDHR, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it doesn't help if we can't exercise them in our local systems. So today, the main problem that we face is the binding nature. Now, each and every country, they have a particular executive system or maybe a legislative system to enforce laws in the particular country. Now, for example, if we take most of the Westministerial system, we have countries like England, Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, they have a parliamentary system where the law is made from the parliament, the main legislative body of the country. But when it comes to the international law, what we really lacking at something, that is, we don't have a international legislative body. We don't have that still. There is no body to create the international law. So the international law comes in different norms, different aspects. So that's why it doesn't make a straight binding upon the society or the international world. Now, from one side, we have the international commercial law, the law of the sea, which comes in different conventions. But when it comes to the human rights, there is no particular, a direct source of law which involves the binding nature of this legal system or these human rights and humanitarian laws. Therefore, from a domestic level and then the regional level, and then only we can address the international level. So therefore, it is important that this cannot be done universally. It has to be started from the domestic level itself, where the domestic law should be enhanced and developed to recognize the international law and the importance of human rights. Then therefore we can say international human rights law preliminary consists of treaties and customary international law. So in present world, the public international law as well as the international human rights law is safeguarded from two aspects, that is the treaties and another one is the customary international law. So these two concepts make the binding nature upon the law. So apart from that, you have the other international human rights instruments such as regional instruments, international human rights law conventions, and human rights bodies which safeguard and which act upon that. Mainly, most of the international human rights instruments, they do not have the legal binding force. So that has become the main challenge in the world, because even the countries agreed upon the terms and the section in the United Nations General Assembly. From after that, they do not concern much on implementing what they agreed into their domestic system. So therefore, now it has been a major challenge to the international world and international humanitarian organization and people who really care about safeguard the right of the people to how to safeguard them. They have the problem. They are facing this problem for a long time, like how we can make this binding upon the people, or how we can put the countries to come together and work for it. So this has been a major issue to be addressed. So we'll see while we are talking, discussing further, how can we really do the benefited things for this world through this. So in nowadays, as I talk about, the treaties are important. They play a vital role here in making this international law. So there were different treaties or different what we call conventions and other formulas, the agreements, international law agreements, and other things that really help and provide the protection for these safeguarding these rights. So if we take about what you call a treaty, let me explain in simplified words that treaties are like written agreements between two or more states. So that is the only legal binding document that where we can bring the two countries into a legally binding agreement, because it doesn't help, it doesn't matter how many conventions or how many documents you signed or you accept if they do not have this legally binding nature. So treaties, on the other hand, they act as a pillar where the two states can agree upon things, and they mutually agreed upon the certain tasks and implementations of the human rights. So every treaty is forced in binding upon the signatories, and such must be executed in a manner consistent with the treaty. So when you sign a treaty, you get a binding nature. But this binding force also work in two different ways. Where some countries follow the system of dualism, while the others being in monist. So in dualism, as you know, dualist country is a country where even you sign an international signatory, as long as you didn't rectify or you didn't put it into your domestic system, that doesn't become a domestic law under your domestic legal system. So on the other hand, monist countries, as at the very first moment where you sign your international treaty or the international agreement, it becomes a law in your domestic legal system as well. So most of the countries follow the theory of dualism or the dualist nature. Therefore, even you sign an international treaty, that doesn't mean that you are directly binding upon it. So after you signing the international treaty, you have to rectify it in your own legal system. That only it becomes a law of the domestic law or the law of the country. So treaties, therefore, it's very important in this aspect. And treaties are the, I would say, the flag barrier or the main runner in this race, because the only treaties make the binding effect upon the states among states. Otherwise, everyone go to the General Assembly of the United Nations, they agree as saying, yes, I agree, I pledge my support over this, but they come into their own country and they just forget about it. So therefore, the treaties are very much important aspect in developing the international law as well as the international human rights law. So after the treaty is signed, that, as I mentioned, it does not go into effect immediately. If it requires a ratification by the legislative branch of the state's government. So if it is, as I mentioned earlier, if it is dualist country, you need to ratify it in your own legal system. So mainly the treaties may either self-executing or it can be non-self-executing, depending upon the domestic legislation or the domestic legal system you follow. So it can be differ from country to country. So treaties have different names that we use in international law, names like convention, protocols, covenants, and mainly on. So today, therefore, it is so much important that as countries, that, or what we call as states, that when you agree upon something, it's better to go with a treaty. So what, because if you breach a treaty, then you can go for the international courts. So people also now thinking the international courts, when you hear the word international courts, okay, they are like major bodies, they are so powerful, they can do whatever they want. No, it's not something like that. So before you go to there are mainly that there are two international courts that have been highlighted in present day world. One is the ICJ, which is the International Court of Justice, and then one is the ICC, the International Criminal Court. So International Court of Justice are there to safeguard the countries. Now, if we take like the cases like United States versus Nicaragua case, so where International Court of Justice given order, given a judgment in favor of the Nicaragua over the United States. So those are very vital things. If you have the time, you can follow them. Just Google it, United States versus Nicaragua. So those are prime examples that try to build up the universal justification or the universal justice that everyone we talk about, because as you know, we ran by in different methods or following different formulas. We name some countries, so we categorize some countries as they are powerful countries. I'm not going to mention the names in a in kind of this kind of open and public forum, but from our heart you might get the idea of which countries I'm referring to as powerful countries. On the other hand, if you go to the Security Council of the United Nations, there are 5 permanent members: USA, Great Britain, China, France, and Russia. So there are 5 main pillars that, if it want to take a decision over the security of the world, all the 5 members have to be agreed upon. Now, on the other hand, we talk about the concepts like democracy, representation, equality. We talk them in very high volume. But when you come to your main body, which is much more responsible over the protection of the internal world peace and world security, where is the democracy? One can question that directly, because all the 5, if one of the country is objecting over one thing, then that resolution cannot be passed. So that has happened when 2022 February, when Russia declares the war against Ukraine. The only place where the Ukraine has to come at the very first instance was the Security Council. So the Ukraine passed the resolution over the Security Council, but it was rejected. Why? The Russia was against it. So where is the universal equality we discuss? So there are things to be changed. Now, if you want to expect this universal justification, the universal equality that everyone should appreciate, then the check and balances should be there. That's why the French philosopher Montesquieu at the very first place talk about this. In power, there should be checks and balances. If the power goes to someone, then that particular person can become a tyrant. Tyranny is there. So that's why we should stop that. But there are some inherent problems in this international law and the international public forums as well that need to be addressed in very high scale. So criticisms are there, and everything is open to criticism, but criticizing is not the only thing that we can do. We have to go beyond the criticisms, and we have to in practical, we have to exercise something that can be work. If something always fails, then that doesn't help for the entire world. Then you have the customary international law. That's another main branch under the international law. So customary international law consists of principles, the legal principles that the nation acknowledge as binding legal norms in the absence of a treaty or other legal obligation. So when you have a dispute over something, if there is no particular treaty involved, or if no particular treaty exercise over that, there you have to consider the customary international law. So most of these customary international law, they are some kind of widely accepted legal principles in mainly the jurisprudence, and also some scholarly opinions and scholarly writings are also considered as customary international law. So if you take customs and practices flowing from a sense of international legal obligation, so they are widely recognized the general principles of law that both parties should be heard audi alteram partem. That is one of the main legal norm in jurisprudence that when you when you are going to decide over something, that both parties should be heard. But we can see in current some warfares or the current actual invasions, I don't in my personal opinion, I don't want to use warfare. There are some invasions done by the Western world over the Eastern communities. So those invasions are totally ex parte. The both parties were not heard. Some of the democratic leaders, I would use that word, the democratic leaders. I'm not saying all the leaders. Now, if we take mainly the Asian region and in Africa, the main issue is what? Most of the leaders, they're ruling and they're running a country for like decades, sometimes 2-3 decades. But do we see the development that we need to see? Those are the areas to be addressed. Now in Sri Lanka also, if we take a couple of, if I take an example from my own country, the people came to roads demanding the democratically elected leader to go down from the position, or back, not to stay longer over the presidency, just to give up over the presidency and resign from the status. So like that, now the people fight over their, but from a people fight, we should not give up, or we should not give the opportunity for an invader to come and rule over the country. Because now we live in a very, very modern world. The concepts such as slavery and other forms, we do not recognize them in the present world. So we should not build a space where an invader to come and invade our countries. So the mainly thing, even what United Nations even expect, the most important thing and the most powerful thing in a country is the sovereignty of the country. The sovereignty of the country is number one always. So that's why even United or even in a big scale organizations such as United Nations also do not influence much over the internal issues of the country. Because if you are a state which has been recognized, then the sovereignty, the state sovereignty is the main thing. Okay, so that cannot be like, you can't change them over. So that is the main thing, or that is the main aspects of a country. Therefore, it is important that we should understand the concepts. We should understand what is important over the other. That has to be done, or that has to be addressed quickly. Okay, so like that, if the treaties does not work in a country, then we can say there are other aspects, or there are other elements that is available, which are available in a under the international law to be carried out. So under customary international law, the general principles of law, the decisions of the international courts such as ICJ and ICC, they are to be considered, and some of the famous scholarly writings and the statements published by the experts, they can be considered as well under the international customary law. So moving on, the core international human rights. So the next aspect, or the next main thing, is to talk about and understand the core international human rights of a country. So when a state becomes a party to an international human rights treaty, that it assumes obligation and duties under international law to respect and protect human rights and to refrain from certain acts. So the main international treaty or the international human rights treaty that we follow up is the UDHR. Under the UDHR, as you know, there are nearly 30 articles that has clearly been given to discuss or to understand the core international, the main human rights or the main um rights that a person or a human being can enjoy. So therefore, in present day, there are three most important international human rights instruments pertaining to the human rights. That those are the all three collectively known as International Bill of Human Rights. So one is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The other is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is commonly or the mainly known as ICCPR, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, ICESCR. So these conventions are made mainly to enforce the human rights concepts and influence the local governments and the domestic laws to be applied in domestic method. Because mainly, as we know, as we discussed, the UDHR doesn't give a legal binding upon the countries. Even you sign it, even you accept it, it doesn't give a legal binding. So to make it a legal binding, later the conventions such as ICCPR and ICESCR were introduced. So from there, mainly in under the ICCPR protocol number 2, the signatory parties agreed to abolish death penalty, because you know death penalty is death penalty can be disastrous. How are we to decide, or how are we to make a decision that we have the right to take over someone's life? So something like something of those nature were introduced through these conventions, where it benefited the society at large in countries, mainly in the developing countries, where the tyranny is more approaching than the value of human rights. And in also, it formulates laws to be formulated in the countries. So that's why even as long as you sign the international convention or international agreement, that doesn't make it directly binding in your own legal system. So it has to be developed. Okay, it has, when these instrument should be implemented in your domestic legal system. So then only the people of a particular state or the people can be benefited much on from these aspects. So then mainly, if we talk about the other United Nations treaties, CEDAW can be recognized as one of the most important treaty. CEDAW is the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. So we know in past, in the Western world as well as the Eastern world, okay, the women were considered secondary gender. They were not given the equal rights. In some countries still, the education is prohibited for women. Women, they do not get the equal opportunity to have the education. And in some countries, even in some civil societies, right to vote is abolished for women. Women are not allowed to vote. But when a ruler comes, they were under that particular rule as well. So these conventions, especially the CEDAW, it tries to build up this safeguard background for the women. It builds the safe environment for the women, where you can in a similar capacity to a man, that you can go and work in a same workplace. You can take the same decision which the man takes. You can come to the highest position of a company, or you can acquire the highest position of a state. Why? On what basis, on what grounds that we can consider women women are lower than men? So these questions were there. But the introduction of the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Men, some countries take some, I would say, brave actions, because they ban some rituals which have been lasted for like several centuries. So like that, they are from the very beginning and up to till the end. So these conventions help a lot, I would say. Mainly the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women is one of the major conventions that we should address, and that we should really look into it. That we know, after introduction of these convention, they are on. For me, I personally believe in enforcing human rights and enforcing the values of human rights. We can't divide the society as majorities and minorities. So if you want to treat everyone is equal, then we have to expect there can't be any minorities, because we have to expect and respect. Because that's why I said, when we go to at the very beginning of our lecture, our discussion, that those are inherent right. You gain your dignity in your birth. So if you born as a human being, you gain this dignity. You have this dignity, you have this respect. So after your birth, we can't categorize, okay, you are from a minority of a country, okay, you represent the minority community. We can't say that, because that is clearly discrimination. So the other one is the universal discrimination. With the empowerment of human rights, everyone tries to stop the universal discrimination over something. So this convention on elimination all forms of racial discrimination to be addressed as well. That is there over a considerable time period, but we can still see now, if we take the newest issue in countries like Pakistan, the minorities were beaten. Okay, now if we take in countries like Sweden, where the Muslim community, the followers of Islam, in the main roads, the Quran was burnt. So what does it show? The clear discrimination over a minority. So if you follow your religion as a Christian, then what barred from another man following his religion, his faith? So these are to be addressed. So it is true and it is practical that that entire world, that they cannot agree on a universal religion, but everyone should has the freedom to follow their faith. If I want to convert, I should have the freedom. If I want to be atheist, then I also should have the freedom of being an atheist. So that is something in a very major scale that we need to discuss and really need to address on. Then the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So in Africa, as most of the viewers from Africa now, you know what happens in Rwanda, where the Tutu and the other minority groups clash among each other, and the millions of lives got wasted. So mainly the genocide is something that we from if we look at from the 1945 period, where the Second World War was running, during the Nazi regime, millions and thousands, yes, I think I said millions of Jews had to sacrifice their lives for no reason to uphold the vision of the Nazis. So genocide convention is also one of the major convention to be looked at. So if the in today there is another word called ecocide, a new word. I don't say it's a new word, but a new approach where you have to protect the environment as well. But before that, the genocide were there. Okay, in genocide it clearly says uh, defined as a following acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or part national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, mainly the killing the members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to the members of group, or deliberately in uh, inflating the group condition, the life, and everything. So it can be a physical destruction as well as a mental destruction as well. So now in present world, that's why I would say, so everything happens, if all of these acts happen when people think one is superior over the other. So if we can agree upon that everyone is equal and everyone is same, everyone has the flesh and the bones. So no one is I in rare unless if there's a rare medical location, I don't see people with two hearts. Everyone has one heart. Either you live in Africa or you live in Asia or Australia, North America or South America, whatever. Even you are in North Pole or South Pole, you have the flesh, you have the human bones, you have one heart. So then how can you make yourself a superior over someone? So these concepts of minorities and like minor groups, you are addressing people with minority religion or minority community group. If these addressing and these beliefs were stopped, then people have the then people can develop a faith that we can treat everyone in a similar way, we can respect everyone's right. So that is another important convention to be followed, because genocide can be, I would say, totally stop or totally eradicate from the entire globe if we can accept the fact that everyone is equal over the other, that everyone should have the same respect as the other. Then as the time goes on, I quickly move the convention on the rights of the child. So we know the children are the next generation to take up the lead in this world. So children has the, I would say, children have the ability to make this world totally different from what we are currently living up. So children, the convention on rights of child introduced to safeguard the rights of the children, mainly the education and the welfare, and mainly under this convention, the child soldiering were completely banned or were complete, let's say, were not allowed at any situation. It was there because now in a country where I lived in Sri Lanka also, we faced 30 years of civil war. In some part of the war that we saw that the children were forced to go to the battlefront. So if you are a child, you have your fullest freedom, the right to education. In different countries, the ages can be differ, but until at least 16 17 years old, you should gain your education. Then only you can enter into a society with the knowledge and with the empowerment. So child laboring is another issue that we face in half of the most of the countries. The children could not afford their school fees. So the next available option is they work under someone. So their labor is gained by the employers for like low wages. They are paid in very low wage. that cannot the particular wage that these children get, they cannot use to get the supply their daily needs as well. Then the major calamity, I would say, then they select the professions like uh, prostitutions, and they involved in other drug trafficking and human trafficking, and today we see the organ trafficking. Those fields they have to choose because no choice for them. So countries, and I would say not the countries, as a whole world, we should address these issues. Otherwise, we can't have hope on the next generation as well. If our next generation uh, falls apart from its beginning, what can we expect? What are our expectations? Or where are we running to? So these things to be addressed. And mainly, the other convention is the CAT Convention, Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Disregarding Treatment or Punishment. So, as we know, when you got arrested, the authorities, the law protecting authorities, in those under those authorities, you might get the acts of torture. So those were banned, and clearly under human rights law, no one, these authorities are not allowed to torture or give hardcore punishments for the people who they arrest. So CAT Convention is also there. So likewise, dear followers, there are lot of conventions happening at the happening at right this time, but the major issue is the major thing is, as states and law-making bodies, are we really concerned over this? Are we really trying to safeguard these things? That is the main issue, or the main problem to be aspect. Okay. So let's be coming to that. Apart from these universal declarations and universal conventions, then regional wise also there are some treaties made over for the protection of human rights. The main treaty, I would say, the American Convention on Human Rights, which is also known as the Pact of San Jose in Costa Rica, where the American countries, mainly South American and North American countries, agreed upon forming a particular treaties and forming a common convention or a common table where they can enjoy or they can safeguard the human rights of the people. And when it comes to Africa also, the Banjul Charter, which is signed in city of Banjul, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights in 1981. So in Africa also you have a particular convention that in regionally talks about the safeguarding, mainly in those darker periods. The biggest issue was the slavery in Africa. To stop this and other forms of torturing and fight against slavery and everything, so this convention was introduced. Other than that, in those days, we know in early 40s and 30s, the African people were forcibly put into the European countries, and they were used as slaves in those countries. And also in Europe, you have the European Convention for Protection of Human Rights, ECHR, which come into force soon after the establishment of the United Nations in 1950 and its related protocols. So these regional conventions also work hard, or the conventional bodies and authoritative bodies work to promote the human rights aspect. And then finally, I would come to the discussion where the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention also, the Geneva Convention also plays a major part, a vital part, that safeguarding the rights of the people who get affected during the war periods and the struggles were going on, mainly the injured soldiers. So most of the countries in a combat, on a conflict, it's very common that the soldiers of the enemy parties got arrested and they have to face number of torturous acts. So everything under the Geneva Convention, everything they try to stop this, not to enforce these type of cruelty and cruel acts upon the people, because everyone, as I said, under these human rights, the main concept is everyone is equal over the other. So you not, one cannot be regarded as a highest authority while another can be regarded as the lowest authority. So mainly the Geneva Convention applies during the international armed conflicts between two or more nations only. So that, I would say, now there are different conventions throughout the history have been made to safeguard the protection of the human rights. But as I pointed out to you at the very first instant, the main issue is under the public international law, we don't have a law-making body. So that is really lacking at this time. So people think the UN is the law-making body of the public international law. That is not like that. UN is there. The UN is there mainly after the Second World War, because all the countries understood the concept that we should come under one place, that we should be under one place, that we should not create an opportunity of making another world war. So even we have made that pledge. Now you see in different parts of the world, if we rotate our globe, we can point it out. In certain countries, the wars were taking place daily. Innocent human lives got affected due to these acts of people. So therefore, I would say it's everyone's duty. You have to safeguard your rights, and meantime you have to safeguard the other rights as well. So this is an interesting topic to be discussed, but I know we have been given the time limit. Therefore, I think you had the basic knowledge over these concepts, and I encourage you to follow, because only us, we can represent another through only us, because we have to be the voice for the voiceless. That's what I always follow. Now, as you know, one of the greatest characters that in the world history ever produced, the Nelson Mandela, he's from the African continent. He fights for the freedom, not only his freedom, while he's been in jail for so long period, he fights for his own people. He fights for the Africa entirely. So likewise, you have to be the voice for the voiceless through human rights and in the international law. And whatever you really work at, you have to know these rights. And it doesn't matter you are an engineer, you are a software engineer, you are a doctor, chemist, or whatever. The field is irrelevant. You just need to represent yourself for another human being. You have to appear for another human being. So that's all. You don't need a huge power. You just need it's simply you being a human being. You can act upon the other. So that's the thing in very nutshell. So I think with that, let me conclude the discussion right now. Thank you very much for the cooperation, and I really like to convey my gratitude to the Nile University for this important task, actually conducting these types of seminar where the young people can have an interest on these subjects and they can work on this. So as a young delegate, as being myself as a young delegate, I have met a lot of African youth in world summits and other conferences. So it's very it's a prestige opportunity for me to deliver this kind of short, I don't say it's a lecture, a short discussion with you all. And if there are feedbacks, I'm really happy to answer them as well. If you do have anything, like, you can use the social media sites and get over me. And I really looking forward to work with you all in the future events as well. And also much appreciation on the Eurasian campus as well, especially Venerable Diltara Nyananda Tero for this wonderful opportunity that given for me to address all of you. So thank you very much for your precious time, and sorry if I got a little bit delay of delivering the session, and hoping to meet you soon as well.